Good morning and welcome to today's meeting. I'm Councillor Erin Muddyman-Rawlins, the Chair of Elections and Democratic Structures Committee. Before we start formal business of the agenda, I would like to welcome Councillors Duncan Anderson, Susan Durant, Majid Khan, David Nevitt as new members of this committee following their appointment at Council at the AGM on the 17th of May 2024. Welcome. Before we commence, I would like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We're not expecting a fire practice today, but if the alarm sounds, please leave the building the way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber. When you have left the building, proceed down the stairways through the exit to the emergency exit at the ground floor. If there's anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located. And the use of the intercom situated on the left-hand side of the doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is the public square outside of Cast beyond the fountain. Today's meeting will be audio and visually recorded. By entering the chamber, you assert that you that you will be recorded and that your images will be retained and broadcasted on the council website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and that you only focus on recording those people participating. Do we have any apologies for the meeting? Yeah, is there anybody with any more? No, thank you. So for the press and public to be excluded, there are no exemptions from today's agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope, perfect. Can we move on though to the minutes of the last meeting? Can we accept the minutes of the last meeting as a true and accurate record? Yes, Chair, thank you. Sorry, excuse me. So we move on to the elections update, and Trina Barber will introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so we've had quite a busy few months, just a little bit. So there is quite a lot of updates on the election update this time. I keep referring to Simca as last year because it feels like it were, because there's been that many since. So the first one really to update you on is the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority election that was on the 2nd of May. So this is a bit of a breakdown and background information to everything that happened with that election. So we obviously had a South Yorkshire-wide election where Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster and Sheffield all voted for a South Yorkshire mayor. We had 151 polling stations for the whole of Doncaster, and we had postal vote sessions taking place in Colonnades for the first time because the Mary Woollet Centre, which is normally our postal vote opening venue, had been closed. That went well, it worked well. I'm not sure if anybody went and visited over the last few elections. But we've got a whole floor over there at Colonnades, so we have used it again for the parliamentary, and we will continue to use it until it's actually no longer vacant and able to be to use for postal votes. We had the racecourse as our count venue as normal, and during the election we had around 790 staff in total. Electors voted in polling stations across the Doncaster for the May's election for the first time using voter ID. So we'd had a couple of by-elections, but not really big elections where the whole of Doncaster would have been using ID for the first time. We did a lot of campaigning, and sorry for those new members. At the last meeting, I'd given a lot of information about how we'd approached and done some proactive things to get people aware of photo ID. So we'd done leaflets with council tax, radio advertising, letters in canvas, flyers and canvas letters, etc. So we've done a lot of things to inform people about the need for photo ID, as well as government campaigning. So during the combined authority election, we had 97 voters not issued with a ballot paper due to either incorrect or not having the acceptable form of ID. However, out of those 97, 59 electors came back with the correct ID and were able to vote. We had an electorate of 224,802. 56,463 of these were postal voters, and 29,076, that's just over 51%, returned their postal votes. 251 postal vote packs, this is in addition to that sum. These are an extra 251 were rejected, and that's because their signature or date of birth didn't match their personal identifiers that we had on record. And on polling day, 18,486, so 10.98% electors cast their vote in 151 polling stations across the city. That gave us a total turnout for Doncaster of 21.16%, and the total across South Yorkshire was 27.59% turnout. There is a full breakdown there of Doncaster's total votes and then the whole of South Yorkshire's total votes. Oliver James Coppard was elected, and you can find a full breakdown on our webpage. The link's there, and it'll give you each authority's breakdown as well on there if you want to find out what theirs was. Is there any questions on the combined one before we move to the next? No, Chair? No? Okay. We then had a Hatfield Town Council by-election on the 23rd of May. That was for the Dunscroft ward, and that was because a sitting councillor resigned, so we had a vacancy that was called by the 10 electors within the Dunscroft ward. That by-election took place on the 23rd of May. We had an eligible electorate of 4,832 electors. 1,309 were postal voters, and we received back 499 of those postal votes. That's 38.12%. All personal identifiers were checked, and we just had one postal vote that was rejected due to being blank and having no signature or date of birth on it, and we notified that elector accordingly. On polling day was a really small turnout. We had 84 electors in the polling station. That's 2.38%. There was only 2 polling stations in the small Dunscroft ward area. 2 people used one of our free voter authority certificates in order to vote. And on polling day, no electors were refused a ballot paper for having no ID or incorrect ID on the day. And no postal votes were rejected under the new postal vote handling rules either. A total number of ballot papers verified for both polling stations and postal votes were 583, and that gave us a turnout of 12.7%. There were 4 candidates, and James Parker was duly elected. The full breakdowns there on the report, including the rejection reasons. And was there any questions on that one? Chair? No. Okay. We then had a resignation of a sitting councillor for Doncaster City Council, and this by-election was called and set before the general election was announced, so we already had the 4th of July booked in for this election. It was too late to change this date when the general election was announced, because the 4th of July was the last possible date that we could have held it due to the time frame we have to have it within so many working days. So this was a possible date. We couldn't move it at all. So we went ahead and did it on the same day. Now, the only reason we looked at why it might have caused any concerns was because the franchise is actually different for a parliamentary election compared to a local ward councillor election. EU electors are not able to vote for parliamentary elections, but everyone can vote at a local election. So it's for local people to vote in local elections. So we did feel it might have caused some confusion. So we did take some extra steps on the day to help our polling staff to make sure that they knew how to use the register and make sure people didn't receive incorrect votes, or that no one was disenfranchised that were entitled to vote to not receive a town council, the town ward by-election ballot paper either. So for the town one, we had an eligible electorate of 14,239 electors. There were 2,946 postal voters and 1,844, that's 62.59%, returned their postal votes correctly. A further 12 postal votes were rejected due to the incorrect personal identifiers of their date of birth or signatures, and those electors will now be notified accordingly. On polling day, 3,763, that's 33.32% electors cast their vote in the 9 polling stations across the town ward. So that gives us a total number of ballot papers verified for both polling stations and postal votes together of 5,607 and a total turnout of 39.38%. There were 5 candidates, and Rob Dennis was elected for the City of Doncaster Council's new councillor for the town ward. There's a full breakdown in the report of the results, including the rejections and the total turnout. Is there any questions on the town one?
Councillor Gemma Covey.
Hi, Chair. It's about polling stations. Do you want me to take it at this one, or do you want me to take it after the report?
If it's okay with you, Trina, do you want to take it now, or do you want to take it at the end?
If it covers this on the general, do you want to take it after the general one? Yeah. Okay. And then finally, the parliamentary general election. So on the 22nd of May, the Prime Minister announced that the general election would take place on the 4th of July. This gave us 6 weeks to plan and deliver a national election, which usually takes 6 months for us to gather, recruit, book polling stations, visit polling stations, deal with data and proofing, etc. It also came while we were in the middle of 2 other by-elections. So we'd obviously were working on postal votes on the day the news landed that there was talk of a general happening. And we had, obviously, the town ward by-election already booked in. So it was already a busy time for the team. But we managed it, as we always do. We had a boundary review that took place by the Boundary Commission, and it caused some changes that we had to move things around very quickly. And we had already done some work on the boundary changes, but what it meant was some really quick meetings where we had some planning meetings already with Rotherham and North Links. It meant now having to put everything quickly into place, turn everything around within a week, ready for nominations opening, and getting those polling stations booked really quickly, and getting poll cards sent out as soon as possible. So the changes, what happened with the boundary, the new boundaries were that 2 Doncaster wards for Conisbrough ward and Edlington and Wandsworth ward now fell under a Rotherham MP, and they came under Romarsh and Conisbrough constituency. And then 3 wards from North Lincolnshire, that's Axome Central, Axome North and Axome South, now fell under a Doncaster MP for the Doncaster East and Isle of Axome constituency. So this resulted in 17 polling stations within the Isle of Axome now being managed and staffed by us. So that was challenging. It was an area we'd not used before, and it also made where we had a lot of staff that worked for North Lincolnshire coming across and been trained and working for us. So training staff on new ways of our working, and also collecting boxes from North Lincolnshire and coming into us as well. We had 166 polling stations in total for the general election, so a few more than what we'd had for our Simca election. Postal vote opening again was at the Colonnades House, as I'd mentioned before, due to the Mary Woollet Centre being closed down. It worked really well again, and our count again was at the racecourse. We had more than 1,000 people working on this election in total, so quite a lot more than what we'd had in May. A lot of staff to train, employ, and get ready in that short space of time. From just a couple of stats that we've managed to capture here, so from the announcements of the general election on the 22nd of May up until each of the deadlines, so the registration and the postal vote deadlines, we'd received 329 free voter authority application requests, 3,702 online postal vote applications, so that's just the online ones, 431 proxy applications online and 204 overseas online applications. And then I've given a breakdown as per each constituency as to the results. So going with Doncaster Central first. So we had an eligible electorate of 74,678 electors. 19,594 were postal voters, and we received back 14,687. So that's 74.96% return on the postal votes. A further 103 postal votes were rejected due to the incorrect date of birth or signature, and those electors are being notified accordingly. On polling day, we had 23,370, that's 42.43% electors cast their vote in the 54 polling stations for the Doncaster Central constituency. I've also got some more stats that we've now been able to capture. When this report was written, it was just on the first working day after the election. So we'd not been through all the envelopes and all the paperwork from the polling stations. So I can tell you that we'd had, for the Doncaster Central, 131 people used the free photo ID, the VAX. We had 2 people in Central use the anonymous elector document to vote. 1 person requested to use the privacy booth. We had 39 people that had no ID or incorrect ID and were refused, but then 31 of those 39 did come back with acceptable ID and did vote. So that gave us 8 people that didn't return or didn't have ID. There was nobody refused because they didn't show a true likeness or showed fake ID in the Doncaster Central area. So it gave us a total number of ballot papers verified for all the polling stations and postal votes for Central of 38,057. That's a 50.96% turnout. There were 7 candidates in the Central constituency, and Sally Jameson was duly elected. I've given a full breakdown in the report, including the rejections on why those ballot papers were rejected. Moving on to Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme. So we had an eligible electorate of 70,154 electors, of which 18,637 were postal voters, and we received back 14,803, that's 79.43%, were returned correctly, and a further 69 postal votes were rejected due to the incorrect date of birth or signatures. And those electors are also being notified. On polling day, 24,463, that's 47.48% of electors cast their vote in the 50 polling stations that we had across Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme. The breakdown for Doncaster East and Axholme are 105 people used the free VAX. We didn't have any anonymous electors, and we had no one use the privacy screens in that constituency. We had 22 people that had no or incorrect ID, but we had a further 9 come back and use correct ID. So there was 11 people that were unable to vote in the East and Axholme, and we had nobody refused for having fake or not a true likeness ID that was shown. The total number of ballot papers verified across all the polling stations and postal votes together was 39,266. This gave us a turnout of 55.97% for East and Axholme constituency. There were 6 candidates And Lee Pitcher was elected for the Doncaster East and Isle of Axholme constituency. There is a full breakdown of the votes along with the rejection reasons on the report. And then lastly, the Doncaster North constituency. We had an eligible electorate of 69,759 electors, of which 17,397 were postal voters, and we received 12,294 back, so 70.67%. A further 85 postal votes were rejected due to the incorrect date of birth or signature, and those electors will be notified as well. On polling day, 19,183, 36.64% electors cast their vote in the 62 polling stations across the Doncaster North constituency. The voter authority certificates used for Doncaster North was 113, and we had no anonymous elector documents, no privacy screen requests for Doncaster North. We had 18 people attend that had not got the correct ID or no ID, and 6 of them returned back and were able to vote. So that gave us 12 people for the Doncaster North that were unable to vote in the station due to ID. No one was refused to vote because of fake ID or not a true likeness on their ID. So in total, the number of ballot papers and polling stations and postal votes together was 31,477, and it gave us a turnout of 45.12% for Doncaster North. There were 9 candidates, and Ed Miliband was duly elected for Member of Parliament. I have given a breakdown there, and one of the things just to note for Doncaster North, you will notice that the rejected ballot papers were a lot higher than the other 2 constituencies. So it's just to give you a bit of feedback from what we were receiving in the office on the day. We had a lot of calls from staff on stations to say people were just walking in, asking why there was no reform candidate, tearing a ballot paper up, or just putting them in the box with nothing on, or walking out with them as well. And the ballot paper at the count, the ballot paper accounts also showed this. So Neil will know he was working on this constituency. We had a lot of torn up ballot papers, plain ballot papers. A lot of the ballot paper accounts compared to what was counted in the box was lower, and that's because the staff had reported to us that a lot of people were walking out with them and they were asking for them back and they were refusing and just walking out with them on the day as well. And we did, when postal votes went out, had a lot of calls about it as well to say, why have you not put a reform candidate on? You know, why have you stopped reform standing? They just didn't understand, so we were having to obviously explain that they'd not fielded a candidate in the North area.
Thank you for that report. Is there any questions? Gemma?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, your staff, for the hard work you put in. We saw that during the election night as well, and how hard your staff worked. So I just want to say thank you. It was a really good night and it was run very well. So thanks again. And sorry to hear like some of the stress from what you said from your staff and some of the polling stations as well. Also, I just want a quick note and say thank you for responding to me regards to a query around polling station in Town Ward. It was like, it came from door knocking to one of our residents, a couple of our residents, leading up to the elections. They're a bit concerned about the use of like potential alcohol on premises on the polling station. I know you've responded very well in an email, but questions back to you is how can we work together to find suitable venues for polling stations, and are there any restrictions to polling stations?
Thank you for that kind feedback. The team really did work hard every day, every weekend, every evening. It was really exhausting in that short space of time, so thank you for that recognition. Polling stations, yes. So there's the restrictions on polling stations is it does need to be accessible. There's no restriction on a venue that serves alcohol being used, so we are able to use pubs, community centres, hotels, things like that. But if there are concerns with any polling stations, we're absolutely happy to work with yourselves to look for something else. We are doing a polling station review this later half of the year. So that will be starting shortly, where we are reviewing all our polling stations. We already started to carry out some work in May, and obviously we just had to stop with what we were doing on that when the general was called. So, I mean, there will be consultations with yourselves, MPs, members of public. So if you are aware of something that's out there in your wards and your areas that you feel would be a better polling station, we would absolutely love to be told about them, so we could go out and review them to see if they're suitable. The things that we would require is access, so people can get in with push chairs and prams, mobility scooters if it's possible, and wheelchair access. So flat, if it's not, we can fix ramps, which we do with a lot of our polling stations on the day. And so just something like that. Anything extra, we're able to kind of work together to see if we can make something suitable. But obviously entrances are the main thing. As long as it's wide enough to get in there, then we can probably adapt polling stations in other ways. But yeah, if you know of anything in your areas, we'll definitely look. So yeah, do let us know. And in relation to the one that we spoke about, I did follow up just to check if you were aware if there was any issues. We'd not heard anything, but you might have heard something from electors.
No, thank you for the feedback. It'd be good to work with you to find a maybe alternative or something that we can put in place. I did get one feedback from somebody who used the polling station. It didn't concern them per se, but when they went in, they did notice there was a bit of, didn't feel comfortable that he's using that station. So for those who are part of that religious community, which this polling station sits in, it might have made it uncomfortable. For those residents that raised the concern, I did drop them a note to say there was a time when the bar was open to use it, but I don't know whether they went in at that time. But if we can look at something that's more suitable to support that community, which that'd be fantastic.
Councillor David Nevitt.
Thank you, Chair. I notice on here we've only got 3 of the actual results. There's a 4th area, which I know was Rotherham, but was there not a result available for people to be able to see on this report?
The reason I've not put the results on is because I can't give the breakdown of all the information, because our Doncaster don't hold that information. It's the returning officer and the electoral registration officer. We cover the registration for those 2 wards, but when it comes to voting, it's the returning officer, which is Rotherham. So I can certainly, we have put the link on our website to Rotherham's results, but because I don't have all the breakdowns, all I could give you was Rotherham's results, which is, I can certainly send you a link, it's on the same as ours. But because I don't have all the breakdowns, I didn't want to come here and you all ask me what was all those breakdowns that you've given us for our election for Rotherham's, because I don't have that information. We can't actually get that information unless the returning officer's happy to release that to us. So I can certainly ask for that information if you want all the breakdowns as well. But whether they'll pass that on and I can send it to you, I'm not sure. But I can certainly ask if you want that.
I would have just thought that as it was a result, you could have put just the result for that particular constituency on and not have to put the reasons why, because it's a different area, so obviously that works. But also, the number of people who were refused a ballot sheet because of no ID, there were no fake IDs given, there were no people who were turned away because of acting wrongly. Is it a lot of extra work just for the being of extra work to actually give this to get people to vote? And why was there so many non-marked or unused ballot sheets which were given a wrong mark? It just seems that there's a lot of them.
So we obviously have to put that information across about making sure you've got correct ID. So we, the last EDSC, which you wasn't a member of. So I did give quite a lot of information. So if you want me to send you that, I can tell you kind of the campaigning we run with the flyers and the information about now needing ID and all the extra activities that we did that wasn't a requirement, but it's kind of initiatives that we took to try and remind people it's new, it's the first election. So we did a lot of work doing that to try and get people aware of ID. We then obviously did a bit more before May's election, and we have to have that information on our poll cards as well, listing all the acceptable forms of ID. With the work, yeah, it's extra training, so training staff on what ID is accepted, that they can't use anything other than what's in the law that we're allowed to use. It's got to be an original, it can't be copied ID, a photo on a phone. Key things to look for fake ID, you know, we're not training forensic experts. It's somebody coming in and, you know, what signs to look for as best we can when someone's coming in with some ID without it taking a long time and forming really big queues. So there was a lot of extra training with staff. And again, yeah, it does take time for the staff to record all this information, which is a requirement. Now, it's not all staying. The things that will stay are the ones where it's been refused or a fake ID has been used. But as for if somebody's used a VAC or if someone's been turned away, they're only used for so many elections and for the first ones. So we've had to use them because it's been our first elections in May, our first parliamentary election, but they won't stay continuous. So that won't be something that we'll keep recording going forward, unless they decide to change it. But at the moment, we are told that it won't be something that stays. So that extra work for staff and capturing all these stats won't be something that they've got to do in future. In relation to the blank ones, do you mean other ones other than the North ones that we've talked about?
Sorry, I didn't quite make it clear. I was meaning about the people who've done the postal vote with the blank information, the date of birth and signature. I was astounded by the numbers that hadn't filled that bit in when they'd filled the form in. So what's going off and why is it so many?
I can't answer that, I'm afraid. It's what people complete. The ones that we tend to get is where someone's just not signed it. They've obviously concentrated on completing a ballot paper and sending it to us. We do get a lot of where there's more than one postal voter in a property. They mix each other's up and sign each other's. We get some of that sometimes. And we do get a lot that are completely blank. A lot of people sign the date that they've filled it in as well, rather than their date of birth. Sign it and then put today's date that they've done that. So we get a lot of those. One thing with postal votes that not a lot of people realise, because we do get phone calls when we send the rejection letters out, is, well, you've rejected it because I've voted for such and such. Those ballot papers don't even get opened. So if a postal vote's come in and a signature and date of birth's not matched, that envelope that their ballot paper in doesn't even get opened. It gets rejected and it gets taken away. And we tell people they can come in and see that because we've not even looked at who they voted for in that sealed packet. But as to why there's so many blank, I don't know. Their instructions are clear. We started with a new printer last year. So when our postal votes went out this year, I don't know if any of you are postal voters, but there is a new piece of paper in there because there's so much more information now with postal vote handling rules to tell people that if they hand a postal vote in, they've got to fill a form in at a station or at the office. There's pictures. We've got a whole page of pictures on how to complete it, which we didn't have in as much detail as last time. So it's even better. The explanation, I think, could be people don't always vote, and when a general happens, they do, and they don't know what they're doing because they do it once every 5 years, maybe. I don't know. I don't know why. I can't answer that question, I'm afraid, because it's all on that person who's completed it, but that could be some factors or reasons why.
I'd just like to thank you and your team because we saw at first hand how hard you worked with the mayoral election and the general election. A lot of hard work. It was hard work for us as well, by the way. We're still all recovering. some of the things I noticed on the doorstep, there was apathy for the election, unfortunately. I think it was the lowest turnout nationally since about for nearly 100 years. So there's a bit of that. The voter ID, it's good to see that nobody was attempting to break the law, but we'd also came across a lot of people who said, I just haven't got the ID, I'm just not voting. And I know you tried your best with the campaign and stuff like that, and it seemed to be people of a certain age or people who might have struggled with some of the legislation as well. So that's disappointing. It's always disappointing when people aren't able to vote and there's too many hurdles put in front of them and not be able to vote. So, and the polling station review, when are you looking to get the information from us if we've received any?
Yep, so the polling station review, once we start work, we started looking at stations and gathering photos of new stations. And so the first approach will be for us to have a look what's available and contact you and just say we're starting to go out to areas. If you've got any that you want us to have a look at in certain areas, let us know, and then we can go out and do a visit. And we have kind of like quite a few pages of things that we have to check and complete. But absolutely, if you can just drop me an email now if you know somewhere you want us to look. But I will get in touch with all councillors to say we're going to be doing this review, so do let us know if there's some that you're aware of now before we start putting anything into place to consult, because we obviously want to check them all before we then send something out to say this is what we propose, because there'd be no point. We might as well work together right from the beginning. So yeah, if you know any now, let me know as soon as you want to, really.
Okay, thanks.
I was just wondering if it would be possible for you to send the voter ID report out to all the committee members, because obviously we've got new members that weren't here for that report, and I just think it might be useful going forward, if that's okay, Gina. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Is there any other questions? No? Perfect. And I'd just like to formally thank you and your team, and everybody that worked in the polling stations and everybody that worked on the floor at the count, because it's not easy, and we all deserved that break on that Friday, I think. But yeah, thank you so much to the team. It was very well run and wonderful to see you all working, but thank you so much. So if there's no other questions, do members agree the report? Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Well, that concludes today's business of today's meeting, and I would like to thank everybody for their attendance, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you so much for your time.